This is the SEO Mindset podcast with your hosts, Sarah McDowell and Tasmin Suleiman. This podcast is for SEO professionals, and each week, with the help of our wonderful guests, we discuss the important stuff that actually affects our careers and progression, but sadly often doesn't get talked about. You know, the invaluable soft and interpersonal skills that are often taken for granted, such as the skills we need for listening, time management, communication, and more. We also talk about the big issues that affect us and our careers, such as burnout, imposter syndrome, self-belief, saying no, plus other big issues and obstacles. With this podcast, we want to share knowledge on topics that unlock our listeners' true potential and enhance not only their careers, but all parts of their lives. So, are you ready to prioritize your own personal growth and career development? Then let's crack on with this week's episode. Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the SEO Mindset podcast, where your hosts are myself, Sarah McDowell, and the ever so wonderful Tasmin Suleiman. Now, unfortunately, we have no Tasmin today, but that means that we have a cracking guest lined up. Now, before I do that, before I introduce my guest and what this topic is about, I just want to remind you of the ways that you can support the podcast. So if you enjoy what me and Tasmin are doing, there's a couple of ways that you can support us. First up, you can give us a donation. So we are set up on Buy Me a Coffee, so an external website that allows creators like the podcast, like me and Tasmin, to receive donations from listeners. If you fancy doing that, you can follow the links in the show notes. And in the show notes as well, there is a link to subscribe to the podcast. Why should you subscribe? Well, whenever there's a new podcast episode ready for you to listen, you'll get notified. So you'll never get FOMO. You'll never miss out on whenever a new episode is ready for you to listen to. And if you're feeling extra generous, why not give us a review? Even better if it's 5-star. Anyway, let's crack on with today's episode. And my guest, who I've got joining me today, is the wonderful Oleksandra Lazarchuk. And they are a digital marketer with a passion for SEO, starting in the industry around 5 years ago, and they never got bored. The dynamics of it is what they find most fun about the job. It pushes them to learn, try new things, as well as create an open space for sharing their observations. They currently work as an SEO manager at YOYABA, which is a German marketing agency focused on revenue marketing. Right. And the topic, I nearly forgot to say what the topic was, being aware of your triggers. So a very important topic. So let's get Oleksandra onto the podcast. Hello, hello.
Hi, nice to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. Very excited to have you join me on this podcast episode to talk about a very important subject. So how are you feeling? How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. It's my first podcast recording ever. I'm super grateful to be here. And of course, it's a little bit nervous time, but generally I feel good. It's winter and windy outside, but feels nice to be like in this cozy atmosphere of that you created here.
Ah, that's wonderful to hear. And I'm super appreciative that your first experience of being a podcast guest is on the SEO mindset. So thank you for choosing us and, putting faith in this podcast. So yeah. So the topic of today is being aware of triggers. Now, it's a very common word, isn't it? Like we hear about this a lot about what are your triggers, being aware of triggers, what triggers you. So I think where we need to probably start is taking it back down to the basics. So, what are triggers? What are we talking about when we say that word? And can you give us some examples?
Yeah. So trigger is a thing, a person, an action, a situation that is causing some intense emotion reaction. Um, and that's typically the way our body is reacting or processing some of the past traumas, but just like spitting out some some emotion or some particular action to the particular situation. And if we talk about the examples, there are, if we start like generalizing, that can be some negative previous experience, or it can be some trauma. Like that's probably the most common thing. Can be anything related to some relationship, loss, grief, change, potentially. Fear can also be a trigger. And if we go into the real life examples, I think the most common one that everybody knows as a trigger is fireworks for a military veteran, or from SEO life. Let's say if you get weekly meetings with some client, and you know that the client is difficult, it can cause some it can trigger some particular emotions in you that are negative. So I would say these are my examples.
They're very good examples. And I suppose to take it back down to the basics, it's triggering an emotional reaction from you because of a past experience. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there are going to be lots of examples of that in SEO. Like you said, for example, dealing with tricky clients, or maybe you've had past experiences of dealing with a tricky boss, or where you've had to relay information about, I don't know, traffic drops to a website, and you get triggered because that wasn't a great experience. So I suppose there's a lot around us in our
Mm-hmm.
professional life, being in SEO, working in SEO, but also personally as well. So, experiences that we've had in past relationships, whether that is with a loved one, with family members, with friends and stuff. So, it's a lot related to your history, isn't it? And what is triggering you. So, now we've got a good understanding of that. Why is it important that we need to be aware of our triggers?
Maybe I could jump a little bit back to the previous topic, like to the intro. Uh, just like some interesting thing came to my head, and I think it's worth mentioning that triggers are pretty much the way our brains have processed the previous traumas. So something has happened to us in the past, and then our brain connected some particular reaction to that, and then to save us in the future, brain just reproduces this reaction, and
Mm.
that's what is causing like later on some issues for us in our lives. I think that's a good addition to like summarize the topic, like what triggers are.
A hundred
And
percent, 100%. Because just to add, our reactions, whether it's physical or mental, are normally there to protect us. So that's what that trigger is there for, isn't it?
mhm, yeah, exactly. And coming back to the question, like why is it important to be aware of them? I think the awareness of the triggers leads us to the better feeling with ourselves, to the healthier reactions to things, to general better mental state when we are dealing with certain situations, and definitely a better self-awareness and self-understanding. That's how I would put it.
And self awareness gets brought up a lot in our podcast episodes, when me and Tasmin are talking about different topics, or when we're with our guests, because self awareness is so important, isn't it? Because
Mhm.
like different ways that we can be more self-aware, and triggers as part of that. If you're aware of how you react, or how you might react to a situation, you can better manage yourself in a professional manner, but also outside of work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, they say that uh, awareness is like part of solution already, right? So just when we know that something is causing the particular intense reaction for us, we already sort of process this information. We can potentially navigate ourselves to the different way of acting, to the different reaction, and long term train ourselves to be more resistant to this kind of issues, or maybe absolutely like never mind about them in the future.
Yeah, because reflection is important, isn't it? And we should be reflecting back, and not to sort of give ourselves a hard time, because say, for example, you find yourself in a situation and it's turned out badly, and one of the reasons is because you got triggered. It was one of your triggers. When you're thinking back and you're reflecting on that situation, don't give yourself a hard time, but learn from it, I suppose. And like the amount of times where it's horrible going back to that situation, because you have to put yourself back into those shoes that you were in. But it's really helpful, isn't it? Because that's how you grow. That's how you develop. That's how next time when you are presenting with a similar situation, hopefully you can have a better outcome.
Yeah. And in addition to that, I think, first of all, give yourself some slack. But on the other hand, from my experience, I can say it's always okay to just, if there is another person involved, it's always okay to get back to that person. If that caused some particular reaction, talk about this, talk through, and most of the time it will help you find out some answers. Or if maybe this trigger caused some, I don't know, difficulties in the relationship with the person, it's always possible to talk this through and find some and commonly find some ideas or answers to the trigger, and like dive deeper into the whole topic. It's always okay, I think, to just be open about how you feel and discuss that. And vulnerability is just fine.
Yeah, because that helps you resonate and build better relationships as well, doesn't it? If you are open, transparent, and honest, and actually, someone's going to have more respect for you as well, because we all make mistakes. We all say things when things get heated. We all react in a way. But if you own up, take accountability, and talk to that person like an adult, it's only going to help foster a better relationship. It's only going to help foster a better way of working with that person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Right. What I suggest that we do is that we take a short break, and when we come back, because now we've got an understanding about what are triggers, you've given us some great examples, we've talked about why it's important. I think when we come back after a short break, it'd be really good to talk about how you became aware of your triggers and strategies to manage them. But before we do pause, is there anything else that you'd like to say on this matter? Or
No, I'm ready to move on to the best part, actually, the most practical one. So
yeah,
yeah.
awesome. Right. Well, join us for part 2. Hello everyone, Sarah here. Just want to give you a heads up that Google Podcasts will be discontinued at some point in the new year. If you are currently using Google Podcasts, don't fret. You can still listen to our episodes in lots of different ways. We're available on all the podcast playing apps such as Spotify, Apple, Amazon. You can also listen to episodes via our web player on our website. Loads of different ways. In the show notes, there'll be a link to our website and a link to all the directories where you can subscribe. Why should you subscribe? Well, you get notifications when new episodes are available. SEOs, have you heard about Stat? Stat is a SERP tracking and analytics platform built for tackling large-scale SEO with accuracy and ease. Whether you're in-house or at an agency, juggling multiple sites, millions of pages, or just a ton of keywords, Stat tracks your search performance at scale without falling over. And since each Google SERP is a treasure trove of consumer research and made of more than just rankings, Stat is more than just a rank tracker. From SERP features to competitors, search volume to share of voice, you'll get everything the 100-result SERP has to offer, parsed, analysed and delivered right to your doorstep every single day. It's pretty much the ultimate SEO insights tool. And with instant insight, you can unlock new search opportunities, drive more visibility, and prove the value of the SEO work you do. Want to learn more about how you can succeed with Stat? Head on over to www.getstat.com or follow the link in our show notes. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the SEO Mindset podcast. If you enjoy the podcast and our episodes, you can support me and Tasmin by giving us a donation on our Buy Me a Coffee page. The URL is the seomindset.co.uk/donate. You can donate as much or as little, and we'd be very appreciative. You can also follow or subscribe to the podcast by going to the seomindset.co.uk/listen. So by going there, you can subscribe or follow on your podcast playing platform of choice. And this is a great way to be notified whenever a new podcast episode is live and ready for you to listen to. We are back with part 2. I hope you all enjoyed that short break there. So we are talking triggers. So Oleksandra has given us some examples from her experiences that she's had, and we've talked about why it's important. So let's get into the meat and bones, okay? Let's get practical. How did you become aware of your triggers? And can you share some strategies and tips on how to manage triggers?
That's a very good question because I think it generally works differently for different people. But for me personally, the starting point was to start noticing some strong emotions and following your advice actually from the Women in Tech SEO mentorship. I started noting them down. I carried a journal next to me and I started like putting some notes. What is triggering me? What emotion am I feeling at this particular moment? And then I would take a moment later on at a free moment to look through this, to dive deeper into this topic, and actually ask myself, why did I feel this way, or why did I react this way? What caused this particular thing, and how did it make me feel? I asked myself a lot of questions. Sometimes it was really not easy. Sometimes like it was really deep because some reactions that are there, they are rooted deep in our childhood or something like that. So, but I started noticing patterns in different things, and I think that's like about synthesizing this. So I started noting them down, then I started grouping them, and then I started synthesizing them, and then I started understanding. Okay, so this is like some patterns. This is what is probably a similar situation, or at least like a similar situation for my brain probably, and the reaction is this, but the desired reaction would be something else. So like how can I deal with this? How can I like navigate myself a little bit better in this situation? And then I started listening to myself a little bit more. So when I was approaching a similar situation later on, which I knew already that is a trigger, I would like listen to myself, how I feel right now. Is it like gonna trigger me right now, or am I able to manage it? And with time, I think it came to the point that, especially like when I was in a good mindset, or like in a good, for example, not absolutely tired, it was a lot easier to navigate myself into like the different behavior instead of what my brain would normally do. So I think that's my answer.
So there's two things that I want to sort of bring up here, and I imagine when you're first sort of becoming aware of your triggers and you're noting things down, that must feel a little alien. It must feel a bit weird doing that. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess the more that you do that, did it get easier for you? Did it feel less weird?
I didn't do it for a long time. I did probably for a week, and then my brain was already so trained to notice these things that I didn't need to do it anymore. I was just like grouping them, and then later on I could process. But it was absolutely weird because like you are sitting in the meeting. On one side you have a business notebook, on the other side you have another a notebook where you just write, okay, this thing was triggering for me. That's for
Yeah.
later. That's for now. Come back to the meeting.
But I think it's such an invaluable thing to do, because the only way that you're going to learn about yourself is digging deep. And you said as well, it is going to be hard because everything leads back, or pretty much everything leads back to childhood or past experiences. So it might be upsetting or it might be hard at times, but it is worth it, isn't it?
Yeah,
If you, yeah.
absolutely. It makes me feel more stable, stronger, and like more, especially more in control of myself.
And how did you find? So, obviously, there's like learned behavior, isn't there? So, when you're becoming aware of your triggers and you're becoming more aware of how you act, how easy was it to change your behavior, or how easy was it to start that process?
Really depends on the trigger, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's generally not easy. You really need to process it. So, I had this one trigger that I couldn't get to the bottom of it, and then I took half of Sunday just sitting together, like sitting in bed. I woke up, took my coffee, and I was sitting for hours, um, creating a mind map to get to the bottom of it. And once I did, um, then it was much easier later on to navigate myself into some journey. But some triggers I still don't have figured out, so it's like halfway. Um, I understand like that it's a trigger, but I don't know what's causing it exactly. So that's like a longer process to get to the bottom of it and change the behavior. But just understanding that it's a trigger already makes things a little bit easier.
Mm. And I suppose the thing here is this is continued, not continued, I can say that in a better way. This is a journey, isn't it? So you're not going to fix things like in a week, in a month, in a couple of months time. It's going to be a continuous journey that you are working on. Okay. Yes, you will get better and things will get better and you will handle situations better, but you're always going to find yourself in situations that throw you, and you're triggered. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
life. There's things that are outside of our control. But I suppose the more that we do this and the more that we take time to reflect, the more that we take time to understand, okay, this situation makes me feel like this, and this is why I react. It's all part of developing yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, that's definitely part of personal growth. The deeper you dive into yourself, the more you understand yourself and different parts of yourself, um, the more you probably feel like yourself. But it's
Mm.
also probably a different feeling for everybody.
I mean, from you doing this journey and with you yourself being more aware, what personally have you got out of it? Or what, yeah, how would you how would you sell it to our listeners, if you get me? Like, um do this because it really helped me with X, Y, and Z sort of thing.
Mm, let me frame it that way. It was definitely easier to deal or to dig to the bottom of the work-related triggers because they are
Mm.
relatively fresh, I would say. They are created in the past number of years, rather, I think. Um, and I think it ultimately helped me to communicate better. Um,
Communication.
yeah, it really impacts the way you communicate. And if you're in the professional environment where you have to advise clients, communication is key. And sometimes you cannot afford to be triggered during the communication with the client. So this was something that like really helped me to
Mm.
dive deep into the particular triggers and get better in that. Also, the daily stress at work, we all get sometimes overwhelmed, and if we understand exactly why we are overwhelmed, what triggers particular this overwhelming emotions, then you also understand that you can deal with it in certain ways. So, for example, Q4 was pretty intense. It's probably intense for many people in many industries, and yeah, I understood that I need some help. I went to my team lead. We discussed this. We found some solutions because I dug to the bottom of my trigger, of my stress. So ultimately, it leads you to finding the solutions out of the difficult situations.
Mm.
And that's the
Yeah.
best part of it.
And I suppose as well, there's going to be things that you're not aware of yourself. So, whilst you might be aware of a trigger, or you might be aware that something triggers you, you're not always going to be aware of your behavior, are you? Until
Mm-hmm.
until you start digging. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because even if we try and hide our emotions, or I think there's been times where we've found ourselves in a situation, we don't know how to deal with it, we've been triggered, so we try and mask it, we try and hide it, but then it comes out in different ways as well. So I think even in those situations, y- it's more beneficial because you're understanding yourself on a deeper level, like more
Mm-hmm.
subconsciously, maybe. I suppose I'm getting at.
Um, yeah, I think so because when you have this like figured out for yourself that something is like a trigger, I think our brain then also makes some different connections, and then the next time you're in a similar situation, you're already subconsciously
Mm,
reacting in the particular way. Um, yeah.
yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you could get really deep with this. Like this goes on so many different levels. But ultimately, any kind of self awareness. So if it is knowing your triggers, that is part of self awareness. Anything that you can do that gets you to know yourself better, gets to know why you react and behave in a certain way, is just going to be better on so many different levels with relationships, whether that is in a work capacity or in your personal life.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And if you get somebody to support you on this journey, then it's invaluable. So if there is a friend or a partner with whom you can discuss this and get some understanding, some if you're open also pointing out that hey, you are right now behaving that way, so you are also aware of that. If that's what you're open for, I think that helps even more. But that can go pretty intense.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to think back to, so for example, with me and my partner, obviously arguments happen. We don't live in a unicorn and um what's the rainbows? That was the
Rainbow.
word. Yeah, that's I could see it, but I couldn't think of the name. Unfortunately, we don't live in unicorns and rainbows life. Things go wrong, arguments happen. Um, but yeah, like I think or things go wrong, but I think a lot of the time it comes down to someone being triggered, right? Because that's what happens. So something that me and Tash, my partner, try and get better at, for example, is when we do have a disagreement or something happens where one of us has been triggered, we try and have a cooling off period, but then we sort of try and have a conversation about, okay, this is why I think this happened. This triggered me. Tash will be like, well, this triggered me. And then you figure out, well, in actual fact, I'm not angry at you. it's a past trigger that happened, and that's really interesting in itself. And that's the same in work situations as well. Like maybe something happens at work that gets out of hand. You've been triggered, but when you get to the root of it, you realize, oh, I'm triggered because of a past experience, and I've brought it in to this new experience. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate. On the personal level, like, oh, I can just like count. I cannot even, I don't have enough fingers to count all of the situations, of course. Um, but yeah, sometimes it comes down to the point that we just talk and we know, okay, this triggered me. I'm sorry. Uh, this is my long-term trigger, and then next time it can be again the reason for the argument, but then both of us already know that it's because of this.
Yeah.
And in the at work, at the workplace, with your team, I think I'm actually lucky that I can say some like what triggers me to my team. Not always, not with everybody, but um, in some cases, I have a bad day. I overreacted to something, and then I realized that. And by the end of the day, hey, can we have a short call and just go through this, explain to the person that this certain behavior triggered you. You can talk about that, and it makes you feel better. And then you both of you are aware that something like this can be a trigger in your working relationship and can impact potentially the quality of somebody's day or somebody's work. Yeah.
Because it's all related at the end of the day, isn't it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
your relationships that you have at work is going to have an impact on the work that is produced as a team, as a department, and all of that. So it all feeds in. And I'm very sorry, but we are running, well, we have run out of time, but this has been such a great conversation. And we'll just have to get you back on another time to discuss another one, because this has been wonderful. So thank you very much for um, talking to our audience and talking about an important topic around triggers.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here and diving deeper into this topic.
I do. So with every guest, we do. I need to squeeze in a couple of questions, and then we'll wrap up and ask where to follow you and all of that stuff. But what is the main takeaway you want people to take away from this episode?
I say start noticing how you feel with a notebook next to you. Just put
Nice.
it down next to you, and it will make a big change in your life.
Nice. So get a notebook, get a personal notebook, trigger notebook, or self awareness journey notebook. Yeah.
Yeah.
And write down. Lovely. Best piece of career advice you've ever received?
Um, I can't say globally ever, but I can say what really impacted my life lately.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was tracking the meeting preparations. So I created a spreadsheet where I started preparing for the meeting in a different way. So besides like context of the meeting, I would set the goal, define the expectations, internal and every time external. I would build a strategy for the rapport, and then I would, after the meeting, I would put together the notes of reflection after the meeting, and that changed so much in my communication strategy. And like so I I learned how to better deliver the message, how to get to the client what is expected, and also get what I need to be able to do my job in a better way. So yeah, that was the advice, and I think it was invaluable because you
Ah,
also learn to do things like this later on. You don't need spreadsheet anymore.
that is a really good bit of advice. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
And this is a tricky one, because I'm going to, out of all those wonderful SEO people we've got out there in the industry, I'm going to ask you to whittle it down to one person. So, who's that one person that you think everyone should follow right now?
It's also a little bit outside of the scope. I was thinking, and I would name Chris Walker, a founder of Refine Labs. It's a B2B marketing agency that is specializing on demand generation for business growth. And they obviously also do the SEO. But I've been listening to the podcast of Chris, and it helped me to connect so many dots in how just business works, how marketing works, how to see the bigger scope of SEO impact. And that's why I would recommend everybody to follow and to take a moment to dive a little bit deeper in the topic, because right now the industry is changing so much that we need to be ahead of the trend, and that's what will help.
Nice, thank you. Well, I'll make sure I just did some Googling. So I have found Chris Walker on LinkedIn, and you said it's Refine Labs, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'll pop some links in the show notes. Oleksandra, where can people find you? What if they want to carry on this wonderful conversation, ask you questions, connect, or just see what you're posting? How do they do that?
I think best platform would be LinkedIn.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'll make sure that a link to your LinkedIn account is in the show notes. And I would just like to thank you, Oleksandra, again for joining and talking about a very important topic and being very transparent and open and honest with us as well. That's been very helpful when we're just discussing triggers. So thank you very much. Reminder again about the ways that you can donate or subscribe to support the podcast. So yeah, give us a one-off donation via our Buy Me a Coffee page. You can find a link to do that in our show notes, and there's also a link in our show notes so that you could subscribe. And if you do subscribe, the next time that there's a banging episode like the one you're listening to right now is ready for you to listen, you'll get notified so you'll never miss out. Right, I'm afraid to say that is it. Got to call time. Thank you once again, Oleksandra. And to everyone else, goodbye and until next time. Hey, SEOs, are you ready to strike more eureka moments? Then you'll need the ultimate SEO insights tool, STAT. STAT delivers position SERP insights in any location, on desktop and mobile, every single day, for keyword counts that start in the thousands. There's no more guessing who the competition is or how you measure up. STAT's powerful share of voice, metrics, and robust competitor tracking keep you in the know and on top of the SERPs. With one-click CSV reports, handy APIs, and pre-built Looker Studio connectors, you can even take your SERP data to go to fuel deep analysis and ambitious experimentation. And that's just scratching the surface. Learn more about STAT at www.getstat.com or follow the link in our show notes.